Over 150 border disputes, clashes, skirmishes, or outright border expanding wars are being fought in the world today. Most familiar, most recent would be Ukraine and Crimea, but the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Israel. Tibet is disputed, and for over 80 years, Kashmir has been hotly contested. Even Gibraltar is still disputed between the Spanish and the English. What comes up? Well, it's this feeling of like, how can there be peace when they've taken our land? These are hugely difficult issues, requiring people of wisdom to sort it out because it's really hard to get anyone to listen to the other side. It just doesn't happen in our normal way. We want to keep that conversation out there because my land, this is our land. We'll possess our land, our territory, as long as we can. And if we can't keep it anymore, we'll make the claims on our territory, right? Because it's ours. And think about it in your kingdom, in my kingdom. It's the same way. As long as you can maintain your borders, you'll keep the peace talks at arm's length, right? You don't need those because you have your possession. And during a border skirmish with God, it's hard to back down because it's a turf war. And we feel that we'll lose if we let him in. We're lied to that this is our land. This is our territory. If I don't fight for it, no one else will. In fact, God has fought for it, bled and died for it, and rose again to claim it. Yes? So I just want you to think about this. When do you find yourself most interested in God's perspective, his peace talks? Is it when the pressure's on? Or when you're feeling relaxed? When you're succeeding or failing? When things seem to be in your control, or when you find out the truth that, okay, actually life, my territory is not under control. It's all out of control. Now, I find for myself, I'm most likely to seek God's perspective, to engage those peace talks when I've come to the end of the range of my effective will. Okay, that's another way to talk about kingdom. The range of my effective will, right? I say it, it happens. You know what I'm talking about? The range of that. So at the borders of our effective will, at the borders of our kingdom, is where I'm forced to engage the king and his kingdom. Maybe think back when your first border skirmish with God. I remember the first time, it was when I was 18 years old. I couldn't rein in my passions, my desires, my character. The chaos in my kingdom was causing self-destruction. The solutions that I had reached for to calm my aching soul had caused more and more chaos. You may be there. Your solutions, and good for you for looking for solutions to the chaos, to the difficulty, but your solutions have come back to bite you. Maybe food hasn't really done everything it said it was going to do to encourage you. Maybe your retail therapy just made you broke, but it didn't really calm the thing, right? Your escapades sexually, or maybe just other kinds of adventures, this really didn't do it, did it? So I know I came to the border of my realm, and I bowed the knee and invited the king and his kingdom into at least the outer fringes of my chaotic kingdom. And with Jesus, I set up an embassy in the capital city of my heart. I cried out to Jesus in words I cannot forget. I don't have what it takes to be the Christian you want me to be. And he replied with just mercy and compassion. I never said you had to have what it takes. That's something I'm going to do through you. And to that I replied, just weeping in tears, well, then you can have my life. That was 30 years ago. And I'm stunned by his ability to work his peace in and through my life, even with the limited sporadic access I've given him. Of course, in principle, he's the king of my life, right? It's his territory now. But I still, like you, probably get fascinated with the range of my effective will. And I borrow back the throne from time to time. Thanks, Jesus. I'll take it from here. Appreciate what you've done. Now I'll just go. Because why? Because my name is being slandered and my kingdom is not what it should be. My will is not getting done. We know the antidote, right? Your name be honored, your kingdom come, your will be done. Now I want to say, and I'm sure you do too, the king is on the throne. And maybe that's more theologically accurate to say that. I get that. But I honestly feel like in this analogy, I was more entertaining the ambassador on occasion instead of turning over my kingdom. I just offer this to you. Play with this analogy in your mind. See where Jesus has intersected with the range of your effective will. Because I know I exalt him sometimes to his rightful place. And then I do it again. I come to the borderlands and fail and cry out and listen in again to the sweet, merciful, disciplining word of Jesus. And he invites me to step down from the throne and pray, Our Father in heaven, may your name be more reverenced and awed. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on my turf as it is in heaven. And that's how my King taught us to pray to the Father, to whom he will turn over the kingdom on Judgment Day. Because ultimately it's all his. And as a world, we've come to the edge, to the borderlands. Our solutions aren't the tried and true techniques of the past. We've come to a place where technical solutions will not suffice. Well, remember back, we just do these things. It all fixes it. It's not happening. So as a world, we have to seek adaptive changes to press into the next phase. Are you ready for this? I think it's the same thing in our own hearts. We want to go back to the old techniques, and we crave the time when the world was complicated, yes, but there were experts. We could rely on them. They could just lead the way through. And now, as societal experts are telling us, leadership experts are telling us, the only hope is an adaptive leadership. And for that, we've got to go deep with Jesus. He needs to be invited. Take the capital. Take the throne. Okay, more on this idea of adaptive change later. But today, we're going to explore the story of a ruler, Felix, who entertained Paul, an ambassador of the king, while holding the true king at arm's length. He's said to have a rather accurate knowledge of the way. Right? That's what Christians were called, the way. And you might be in the same place. On your throne, with an accurate view of the way. And so I pray that you'll be challenged, as I was, by the similarities in how you run your kingdom, and also be encouraged by the terrain you've already given to Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Our text today is Acts chapter 24, verse 22, all the way into chapter 25, verse 12. I'll read that to you. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, When Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. And then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody and have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I'll summon you. At the same time, he'd hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. And when 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. Now, 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out the case against Paul, and they urged him, asking as a favor against Paul that he summon him to Jerusalem, because they were planning to ambush him and kill him along the way. Festus replied that Paul was being kept at Caesarea and that he intended himself to go there shortly. So said he, "Let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there's anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him." And he stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, and he went down to Caesarea. And the next day he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. When he'd arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him that they couldn't prove. Paul argued in his defense, "Neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense." But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, "Do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me?" But Paul said, "I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there's nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar." Well then, Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, "To Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go." All right, so those are the official words. I appeal to Caesar. Okay, he's going over his head, right? So this is a pretty straightforward story. It's in the middle, we've got an outgoing governor who should have cleaned up his business, but due to political pressure, Felix didn't want to release Paul and didn't want to risk any more local dissatisfaction, have that on his record. And there's already plenty to put him in the doghouse with Rome anyway, as it turns out. And Paul's being looked on as a source of income by Felix, right? Paul's been bringing all this money. He's obviously can raise a lot of cash and bring it to Jerusalem. Maybe if I just hang out with this guy, maybe he'll offer me a bribe. But just imagine if the bribe was intended to gain his release. Well, that would have been, of course, against God's law, but also would have put him out in open where for 2 years the conspiracy against him would be gaining momentum. Kind of legendary status, these guys who are going to go after and kill Paul. So Paul would maybe escape prison, but out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? Oddly, he's under the protection of God by being in the confines of the prison. So Festus takes over and has to clean up the political mess left behind. And so Paul, after 2 long years in detention, has a new judge to face. We've speculated on what's happening in these 2 years. Letters being written, people being encouraged, Paul sending the message of peace out to the nations. Now, one of Porcius Festus's first jobs, we learned from other sources, was to find a revolutionary who was calling his band of followers to the wilderness to make their rebellion plans. And he chases them down, dispatches him and all of his followers. And now Festus also has to deal with Paul. He's always hearing these complaints, and that's what a governor in Judea is like. We got the West Bank now, we got Gaza Strip now. It was always contested and difficult. In this time, we learned from Josephus that Herod Agrippa II had built a dining terrace in his palace that allowed him to overlook the city and, guess what, all of the temple proceedings. He could lay out there and watch everything going on in the temple. The Jews were so offended by this that they built up a wall on that side of the temple to block his view, just straight up block his view. So when Herod complained, Festus ordered them to tear down the wall. And then what did they do? They replied, "Well, we will appeal to Caesar Nero, because we can't imagine having any part of our sacred temple being torn down." Things haven't really changed, have they? So they sent 10 people to Nero, and they received the ruling to keep their new privacy wall. And Nero's wife, Poppaea, was a very religious woman, and she had pressured Nero to grant them this favor. And so they sent the men on their way home with the news, you can keep the wall, except for this, 2 men of the group. were kept as hostages by Poppaea, presumably as like pets, religious conversants. It just happened to be the high priest and the guard of the temple treasury that were kept back. And so then King Agrippa has to appoint a new high priest and temple treasurer. Such were the politics of the day. And so while prisoner Paul is with Festus, Festus is trying to curry favor and suggests that he be tried in Jerusalem. But Paul knows about the simmering anger in the city, right? His friends must have kept him informed about the plot. Roman prisons didn't have the typical amenities. If you were going to eat and drink and have clothing, it was because people brought it to you. And they would have to show up, and that's just the way it goes. So Paul has appealed to Caesar. There's no sentence, no verdict, no punishment to really appeal. He's just in this holding pattern. So as we know, Roman jails weren't necessarily a punishment, just a detention facility until the matter could get resolved. Now he just kind of moves the court on to Caesar himself. We see God working with Paul and intersecting to make this decision, make this appeal, to send him on to preach the gospel in Rome. Kings and kingdoms will all pass away, but there's just something about that name, Jesus. It needs to be presented in every context, every place. And that's the name that Paul preached to Felix and Drusilla. And I just want to key in on that part of the passage. Verse 24, after some days Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. And he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith or allegiance in Jesus Christ. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control in the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. And at the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. So just think about that. I mean, how much are we like Festus, keeping God at arm's length? Paul is not afraid or ashamed of the gospel. It's the announcement that Jesus is Lord of all. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to deal with that? Allegiance to Jesus is all that matters. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Your kingdom is not your own. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus. This is the gospel. I love Paul's persistence in speaking the truth about justice and self-control and the coming judgment. These are difficult topics, but he's not afraid to speak truth to power. Would I be? Maybe so. Would you be? Maybe so. But I like that Paul was said to be reasoning, not necessarily yelling or accusing, just reasoning. Let's think this through. On my flight home from Raleigh, North Carolina on Wednesday, I'm not sure who was the more captive prisoner of conversation, Adam or I. You should see all the pictures on his iPad of all the cars he's rebuilt. You would learn so much. But by the time we had finished with our flight, after a lot of praying, oh Jesus, I was so afraid right there. I had chickened out. Would you bring me back into this conversation somehow? The reasoning went something like this. Adam, you seem to think that just doing enough good things outweighs the bad stuff, and that hopefully you'll be accepted into God's presence. But you've got to consider Jesus' claims to be the way, the truth, and the life. You got to consider him. Heavenly Father, and his Mormon background became a topic of conversation. Heavenly Father isn't as loving and as accepting as you think if the death of Jesus didn't really mean anything for our salvation. If there was another way, Adam, other than Jesus to be saved, then the Father should have let him off the hook for giving his life on the cross. You remember the prayers, if there's any other way, if there's any other way. No, you must go. If the death of Jesus was unnecessary, we don't have a loving Heavenly Father. We have a brutal, bloodthirsty God after all. You see, Adam, if if Jesus is who he says he is, then we all have a lot of explaining to do. But it was reasoning with him, right? It wasn't, come on, what's your problem? Just like, we got to think about Jesus. We got to consider him. What do you make of Jesus? The coming judgment isn't even off topic these days, as the love of many grows cold. You'll find you can have this conversation with almost anybody. On Tuesday, it was a 2-day trip to Raleigh. On Tuesday, I was picked up from the Raleigh airport by Musa, an Uber driver. And I started praying, Jesus, make your move. What do you want to do? You love Musa, and you want me to represent you to him. So I started asking him about restaurants, and I asked about any Mediterranean food, and then I made the leap that he might be familiar with that. And then we discussed his homeland, Morocco, and then I explained about my visits as a Jesus person, checking in on physical therapy centers over there. And he says, we know Jesus. I'm like, okay, Muslim. All right. He's in the Quran. And I say, yeah, Isa al-Masih. Don't you believe that he's coming back at the judgment at the end of time? Oh, yeah, I totally do. Yeah, he's going to come back. And so on and on and on. We had a lovely conversation where I told him my story of transformation with Jesus, and later, encouraged him to keep his eyes on Jesus. Jesus is Lord of heaven and earth, and allegiance to Jesus is the only thing that saves. I offered to pray for him as he went about the rest of his day. He gladly accepted. It doesn't have to be a fight over these topics, though we will ruffle feathers. Some people will pick up their book and stop talking to us. This is true. But boy, I know that we need courage. And sometimes it's the courage I don't have when I'm defending. Listen, I don't have this courage when I'm defending my own comfortable borders. But it's amazing to be an ambassador of the King who already owns it all. It's all his. I'm just representing him. So Paul speaks of faith, allegiance to Jesus, justice, self-control, the coming judgment. And Felix has mixed motives for hearing him out. Little has changed. As Jesus' kingdom rolls out, justice, making decisions rightly to order God's world, and righteousness, the right relationships are important, especially with the end in mind. Because if God will set everything right in the end, we need to be working those things out now. He's doing that now because we live in his kingdom now, because ownership has changed. The dispute is over. So faith in Jesus, allegiance to Jesus, means we're submitting to his rule. The kingdom is coming little by little in your life and mine. It sure seems like slow progress for me. Does it feel that way for you? Little by little, the kingdom coming, and little by little in the world as well. And judgment is on its way. And matters of justice and righteousness are close to God's heart. Are they close to your heart? Whose kingdom are you in? And one last topic of discussion must have been really awkward, just as it is now. Here we have an adulteress, Drusilla, and an adulterer, Felix, hearing Paul reason about self-control. Oh, this is going to be awkward. Drusilla is the daughter of King Herod, a young, beautiful princess. She was wooed away from her previous royal marriage to a king by Felix, by way of his court magician. Come, be with me, be with me, be with me. I don't think it was easy to discuss self-control then. His audience can't have enjoyed this. We have another Herod relative beheading John the Baptist in a similar conversation, right? And listen, you know this as well as I do. Self-control is the new dirty word for our world today. Self-control. You can't say that. That's like telling a person that they're not perfect exactly the way they are expressing their values right now. Correct. I'm saying we're all broken. We're all disordered. And that expresses itself in different ways in our personal kingdoms. And that chaos needs to be brought under the reign of Jesus so that true peace can reign. Fighting words, right? My goodness. Okay, can I close with an invitation to assess your kingdom? Invite Jesus to bring his reign of peace and hope and life and salvation and beauty and order and love to invade your border and set up his kingdom. Can I do that? Would you just pray? Just Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You are the true King. Like a deep breath, I just invite you in to do your work. Clean it up. Shape me. Change me. Bring in your salvation. Save me from myself. Lord, I anticipate the coming judgment. Save me from the coming judgment. It's all yours. It's all yours. Take me. Take my life. We've got to be praying this, people, all the time. Just bring your peace into my life. And also, I want to invite you to be an ambassador with a story to tell in a fractured, confused world in its borderland moment. As a world, we've come to the edge of the borderlands where technical solutions will not suffice. We've sought technical solutions and the experts, and that's not going to work. We must seek adaptive changes to press on into the next phase. We want to go back into the old techniques, and we crave the time where the world was complicated, but there were experts we could rely on to lead the way, right? But now the only hope is adaptive leadership, and for that we've got to go deep with Jesus, who knows the terrain. In times of distress, we experience fear and anxiety over the potential and realized losses. We look to leaders to fix it. Heifetz and Lindsay, in their book Leadership on the Line, Staying Alive Through the Dangers of Change, they suggest we're living in a complex world, and most problems will require adaptive leadership. You know, what if there's no technical fix? Just switch and then our world's back in order. What if what we're experiencing is not a technical problem, but an adaptive problem? More challenges and more learning are needed. With a technical challenge, you ask two questions. What's the work? Okay, apply current know-how. Who does the work? The authorities. They just take care of it. With an adaptive challenge, they say the question to what's the work is learn new ways. Whoa. Well, then who does the work? The people with the problem. We know some companies that didn't make these shifts, right? Like Blockbuster. They're a big company enjoying the success of their technical solutions, but they didn't make the adaptive switch to the internet. People loved coming to the store and shop through titles until they didn't anymore. Kodak knew that digital photography was not going to stick around. People will continue to buy film and have it develop the way it's always been done. And then, maybe not. And the American church continues to think it can entertain people enough to become better Christians. Do you think that? I can entertain people enough and then they'll become better Christians. Make their environment more comfortable and then they'll just make their kingdom more comfortable and another technical solution will come from another expert and will let the authorities win the day once again. Just a new leadership, a new person, with a new technique. But what if it's up to you? What if you're the problem solver, the peace bringer, the ambassador? I know I'm asking questions, and you don't want questions from leaders. You want answers. We don't want the pain of losses, and we require from our leaders protection from the change. But with adaptive challenges like we're experiencing in our world today, a leader's job, listen, my job is to promote the resourcefulness of the community. And as King Jesus people, we know where our resources are, but we don't tap into them unless we're kind of at the edge of our borderlands, at the end of the range of our effective will, and we say, Jesus, 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 have mercy on us. Fill us, use us. We have experienced losses as a church. Family members have left for greener pastures. And as I've talked with them, I find a lot of sense in their decisions for their families. But it hurts so much. The process can either close off our hearts. Hear me, church. It can either close off our hearts or open a capacity in our hearts. That's an adaptive process. And we all need to dig into this resourcefulness. When we lean into Jesus, we grieve our losses and open our hearts once again to the people he has brought across our path. Right? Your neighbors and family and friends should be invited to the technical solution, which is we worship Jesus on Sunday morning, come to church. Absolutely. Keep inviting. We would love to host all your friends and family on a Sunday morning with you. And, hear the big and, some of them, many of them, statistically speaking, are done with church as they know it. Church? I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So we'll keep inviting them here. Yes, that's a technical solution, something we'll continue to do, and we'll go to them. Oh, but the east side is so hard. The soil is so hard. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean they don't like to come to church anymore. Okay, well, let's go to them. Well, then that's hard for us. So wait, where's the hard ground? Is it in our hearts? Or is it in their hearts? Or both? Sorry, did I just say that? Well, not sorry, I guess. Right now, we're deploying in a few ICC groups a Bible study method that I've taught you all that is used around the world to start conversations among those who've never even heard of Jesus. Discovery Bible Study. So simple and effective. It's actually one of these adaptive solutions we're applying right now. We're training this method in our Disciples Making Disciples Training Center. And we're using it with teen boys right now to encourage them to hear the word and put it into action. Felix in his little kingdom was holding the word at arm's length, but we're trying to bring it up close and personal. You're like, I would like to be trained in that. Well, I would like to train you in that. Last week I mentioned we're closing shop on the disempowering mindset of, well, get on out there and try to be a Christian. Just like, hey, try to run a marathon isn't going to get you to the starting line, much less the finish line. But we're willing to train you. You may be thinking, well, I've got friends that have a spiritual interest and I talk to people about God, but they keep it so general and I don't know how to help them take Jesus seriously. No, we'll train you. I'll train you. Let me know of your interest. We'll start up another training center in January. If you give me 16 weeks, listen, this is a new offer. If you give me 16 weeks, I'll train you to reach at least 2 people who you'll train to reach at least 2 people with the gospel message. After those 16 weeks, we'll form you and shape you into a multiplying disciple maker, a bringer of the King's peace. So as we look at the world that is so upset and so struggling right now, and we look at the disputes, let's remember the disputes in our own hearts as well. Let's invite the King in because he is worthy.